YouTube 2009. Consider the golden age of the platform. One of my most cherished memories of this era is finding these videos of gameplay from WildTangent's Fate, which I think I might need to summarize a little bit. Not the immensely popular anime series of the same name, no. I'm referring to the dungeon-crawling ARPG from 2005, which was basically just Diablo 1 but with a brighter art style, designed for a casual audience, and bundled with HP computers in the mid to late 2000s. I'm tempted to delve a little deeper into these games as they are, but in the meantime, if you want to know more, watch Sear's video on it. It's pretty good.
One Eric Dumb as Fuck the Great, found on level 47 of the Dungeon Gate.
These videos stuck with me from the fact that they somehow had the isometric camera unlocked, which I always thought looked exasperatingly freeing, alongside this cool new splash screen, new character animations, and these hairstyles that made the original spiky anime hair look like preschool in comparison. What stuck with me all this time was most notably this video that showcased the player traveling outside of Grove to a massive plane called the World of Fate, which, if I could compare the feeling of it to anything, it's like that liminal version of Mario 64 with its fever dream of a castle, or for something a little less niche, that same castle in Mario Kart 64 that expands on its boundaries. So, of course, my 5-year-old underdeveloped lobe would look up World of Fate and Fate PC into the WildTangent store on multiple occasions in hopes that a secret version of the game would show up. I showed this video to my cousin, and I watched him spend hours searching for an interactable that would open up the town, and years later, once I'd learned to read, I'd find out that this was a mod made by somebody under the moniker of Heron 246. Turns out, this little Windows XP bloatware I grew up playing had garnered a sizable cult following with a creativity that flourished with the game's encouragement for modification. The original lead developer Travis Baldry gave the community a mod kit when the game first released, and the producer and distributor company WildTangent hosted a community-run forum page that gave extra special attention to this cash cow that they'd milk 3 sequels out of, so many mods were created for this game series and hosted on these forums. You could find new dungeon themes, weapons, spells, monsters, alcohol, and all the fish and gems you can think of created for free out of these people's time and passion. Town mods, on the other hand, were the cream of the crop, and exceptionally rare from the effort they took to make compared to everything else, though town mods would pop up more as the games went by. In the era of the first 2 games' release, there were only 3 creators known to have the patience and skills to produce such works. Apricot Twist never made a town mod. Least is known of him for most of his activity getting wiped from the internet, but he was the first to truly begin mastering the game's 3D assets with his originally modeled and animated monsters and his Mascar Woods dungeon that would be referenced constantly by other modders years after he quietly retired in 2008. The second master, aptly named, was Maestro, who'd create experimental weapons and the first major modifications to the town of Grove and his Japanese town with layout changes, originally modeled buildings, and a separate nighttime setting. He'd specifically inspired user Z-Man to create the future Fate Town mod in collaboration with user Redwood Tree Sprite. And both he and Maestro would later be known for raising the community up with their extensive knowledge of 3ds Max modeling and the layout of the game's files, for which they'd write a plethora of tutorials, answered questions posted in the forums, and created templates for the community to easily model and integrate towns and dresses. The fourth master of the modding scene was Heron, who may as well have been the mascot during its heights as the member with by far the largest output and the highest quality. His most notable creation is his World of Fate project that, over time, morphed into a mod pack to include Maestro's expanded Japanese town alongside the very first instances of completely original towns. Despite these 4 spearheading the community, there were many notable mains that I regrettably won't be able to highlight as much due to my limited resources and time. These are names like G. Brown, creator of the first mod manager, save file editor, and credited in-game as a tester. Zhao, creator of the X mod. El Jefe, creator of the Deep Delver pack. Mr. Sir, creator of the mass mod and brain-based dungeons Crania, Mania, and Dementia. Bugs Bunny 964, creator of Casey's tutorial archive. Nixie and Spock as forum moderators, and many, many, many more names that I hope I can at least cover to some extent later on. This was all part of the modding scene that lasted 9 years between 2005 and 2014. Since then, the modding of this game has become a bit of a lost art. Despite this, if you go into the game's source files, regardless of which version, you'll realize, holy shit, everything is just sitting there uncompressed. Not only that, if you go into any of the .dat files with Notepad, you can get access to every property in the game. So theoretically, all you need to make mods is stock built-in software and maybe an additional freeware photo editor. Monsters, repaint them. HUD elements, delete that cache and apply shit. Items? Well, their inventory icons can be wholly original with 2 PNGs and some DAT file strings to tell the game how much space it takes up, what enchantments it has by default, what sound it makes. You get the gist of it. Unfortunately, modding the first game requires you to delete and overwrite base game files and manually add strings to the .dat files, which can be tedious and very difficult to keep track of. The sequels, however, streamline the process exponentially by adding a new folder of the files labeled Realms that acts as a pre-packaged mod folder to drag and drop most mods straight into. So it's easy to apply mods on your own, but when it comes to making the mods, you'll notice that the models aren't as simple to modify as everything else. And that's because all the 3D assets are locked behind a custom file type unique to this game series alone, can only be accessed through Travis Baldry's mod kit that uses versions 7 to 9 of 3ds Max. A very specific piece of software which is unsupported by Autodesk and not distributed, period. Even if you somehow managed to find an unofficial archive that hosted versions 5 through 9 through a 5-year-old Reddit post, you'd still need a 32-bit Windows 7 operating system to open the fucking thing. So, what can we do? Well, if you can't just buy an ancient laptop from eBay, this was going to be the part where I chaotically explained how to set up a virtual machine, but even after consulting ChatGPT and emitting, 20, 40 grams of carbon dioxide, I couldn't get the programs to work, so fuck me, I guess. Now, there is a modern alternative, but it is still in the works as I'm making this. If we fast forward to the modern era, the Fate Community Discord hosts 2 separate yet unfinished plugins for the free open-source 3D editing software Blender. First is the MDL importer created by user Electric Version. It has the ability to import and export MDL files, which are used for the static models like weapons, helmets, and heads. But it also has the experimental feature of importing SMS files, which are used for the rigged models such as the armor, creatures, and NPCs. But these models tend to have their topology corrupted one way or another, and there is no way to export them back into the game. So it's really only useful if you want to get a closer look at the models. The other plugin is for the Fate Asset Editor, and it is currently being created by users Yana the Undying and Darren. This plugin aims to create, edit, and export all 3D assets within Blender itself, including materials and animations, though currently it does not support SMS files nor SMA files despite the feature's planned implementation. It does, however, have superior MDL support that imports an object's textures and materials and corrects the 3D alignment from the YZ axis that flips from 3ds Max. Most importantly, this plugin's experimental features the ability to import and export SCN files used for towns and splash screens. However, the material values will always be corrupted, and some imports aren't perfected yet. But the exporter is functional and gives you full access to scene points that make up in-game particles and events. No access to collision files though, so you'll only be able to make modifications to pre-existing towns in its current unfinished state. But if this interests you and you wish to see it finished or used in your system one day, please consider donating to this project's GoFundMe page, as this seems like it's the only hope we really have to revitalize the art of modding Fate again. No pressure on the development team, by the way. I can assure you guys that this plugin will be used regardless. So with enough fuck and around, let's go over the history. The very first notable users to join the forums were Greg Brown, only 5 days after Fate had released, Nock and El Jefe, some of the first to get truly ambitious with their texture packs, balancing changes, and tutorials, Heron himself, who made a couple of very small-scale mods in the first 3 years of joining, but mostly sat and waited as the community grew and members like Apricot Twist and Maestro would join and relay their knowledge of 3ds Max, and Shadowfax, who originally came up with the World of Fate moniker for his Fate fan site, which hosted guides, tips, cheat prompts, and a small selection of user-created mods with directly hosted downloads. According to the limited snapshots available, this site only lasted until 2008, but it also had a partner site called FateFan.com, which is still active to this day. And while on the topic of websites, I just want to highlight the original Fate Undiscovered Realms promotional site, besides the forums, which I had no idea existed at the time. The best way to get news of Fate's happenings was through the Visit PlayFate.com button on the game's title screen. And every now and then I'd click it to see if the site would update. I wouldn't be surprised if my 6-year-old self was promoting an aneurysm when I clicked this button and got taken to this site. Even now, it's the most awe-inspiring piece of official media this series ever produced, with an extended version of the only bit of pre-rendered footage we ever got, and you can't even watch it anymore from the fact it uses Adobe Flash, and Ruffle can't seem to translate it correctly. That being said, it's got some cozy-ass renders of the towns, a selection of new enemies with short bios to accommodate, these amazing wallpapers, some trailers, screenshots, and that precious Undiscovered Realms lore that doesn't correlate with the gameplay. They did not need to go this hard. Oh, right, I'm talking about mods. Research for this topic needed heavy use of the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine to comb through dead or bought-out domains, including the WildTangent Orb Forum, which shut down in 2014. The earliest snapshot I could find was from October 4th, 2008, which leaves a whole 3 years prior lost. One can still discern some history before that, though, thanks to a little site by the name of Suridin.net, otherwise known as Johnny Rotten's Fate Mod Archive. It too can only be accessed through Wayback, but this thing is a treasure trove of the first 3 years of the game's modding scene. It is a huge list of mods, complete with their authors, links to their discussion pages, direct zip downloads, and whether they were compatible with the old mod manager or not. Although the discussion links are gone, along with some really interesting mods like most of my Astros, the majority of downloads still function. This is where I found Nox interface UI and reworked dungeon textures, these loading screens by user... this splash screen by Frost, and the Owlbear mod by Maestro and Bugs Bunny, which brings back the original textures and names of certain D&D monsters that WildTangent had to change when it caused legal disputes. Some other notable mods I found here are Heron's Savage Eden Weapons mod, which remade weapons from a long-forgotten MMO made in 2004 and was the first mod he'd ever released. There's also Snow mod, which was Maestro's first published, that added snowman enemies and suits. There's new dungeon variants by users Bugs Bunny, Hillbilly, Jester, Redwood Tree Sprite, and Crazy 3, because the worst feeling in this game is going down another staircase to find the first fucking tile set again. With the topic of dissension, I also want to mention El Jefe's Deep Delver Pack, a mod that targets extreme deep delving by adding new monsters, buff charms, and spells that drop in the absurd levels of the dungeon, alongside companion mod Deep Delving Music, which simply adds one new town and dungeon track to insert. They might be giants. Again gave me whiplash. But yes, all of these mods were designed for the first game and made to be used with the old mod manager, so applying things like monsters and items is a bit of a bitch. If you care to know the process of applying mods to the first game, it has you creating a folder in the game's files called mods, spelled capital MODS, which houses standalone editions that aren't meant to overwrite anything. And then you have to manually copy and paste the strings from the items, monsters, manifests, and spells DATs into the original game's corresponding files. It makes the managing of the mods a little fucked, but dungeons are the simplest to keep track of, as manifest only needs to manage a single string as opposed to these fucking paragraphs. Music, sound effects, and UI mods are all easy overwrites though, just as long as you back up your files and delete that cache. A transition. Back to the archive, this site also hosts Casey's Tutorial Archive, which compiled the written works of many of the game's at the time prominent users. It has all the guides and utilities you'd need to make anything back in the day, from tailored 27-page PDF files for modeling and animating in 3ds Max, to tables of topics relating to .dat file editing, to tips on File Explorer workflow. There's even a massive downloadable spreadsheet here called the Formula of Fate by user Octagon, and it has every fact and stat in the game that you can use to cross-calculate and examine character stats, monsters, pet values, and heirloom buffs. The latter is most important. One more thing that the site hosts, something I should add to the topic of Fate community history, and something that I don't know how to get footage for because anytime I mess with the save files for the first game, it results in endless loading, is the download to a save file for Harry the Deep Delver, a legendary character created by user IU Bigler, who sources say was either the second or third person to reach the bottom of the dungeon without cheating. That's right, despite being programmed to be endless, the game will crash consistently if you try to go below a certain level of dungeons due to the game's programming using 32-bit integers. It's what the community dubbed the magic number, and that number is, are you ready for this? 2,147,483,647. His character was so maxed out that almost all his stats are very nearly that magic number, and his save file was used to test the deep delving aspects of the game. Anyway, I tried combing through the old forum snapshots to see if I could find anything interesting. Like I mentioned, the oldest snapshot was late 2008, but seemingly this was when the community hit its peak with the release of the sequel Undiscovered Realms in July. Heron's output at this time was at its highest. He was releasing his Diablo 2 UI mod, his playable monsters, his animation mod, and the World of Fate, all within the month of August. Later in the year, he'd release the Cardium in the 1.6 version of World of Fate as the first ever instance of a town built from scratch. The Teenager skin, a taller version of the playable character. The Arenas of Fate, a gauntlet of 10 bosses with custom boss room. His Undiscovered Realms fan patch, and a Christmas mod pack called Santa's Gifts. The year, however, would double as Maestro's final hurrah. He would upload the Shadows, which was his first creation before the Snow mod, his Sonic and Friends pack, a mod he claimed had a disgusting amount of time put into it, the 5th version of Baitor's Fish pack, which had been tossed around the community for years, established first by user Baitor and then added to by IU Bigler and Outlawed Wrist. This version, packaged by Maestro and programmed for balance, brought the added total of 101 variations of Fish up to 303 with elite and legendary variants. Lastly, he updated his Japanese town for Undiscovered Realms, putting the day and night into one package as separate realms with content made out of his prior mods, and he'd keep it updated to be compatible with World of Fate. Then, on December 25th, 2008, Maestro posted his final goodbye in a lengthy post, which detailed the revelations of his responsibilities he underwent while visiting his fiancée in the Philippines. He would return very briefly a year later to post an old Bleach-themed collaboration that never got released, and to make one final update to his Japanese town, porting it to Trader Soul while adding an extra island realm to connect the two towns, then dumping every mod he made into it as one final mod pack. Finally, he'd post his mod kit with every custom model he ever made in a 3ds Max format for public use. And with that, Maestro was officially retired from the Fate community. The modding scene slowed down heavily in 2009. Early in the year, Heron would release the Lost Woods realm with its own day and night variations as both a standalone realm and bundled with World of Fate. He also released a Zelda weapons mod that no longer exists, and a sequel to Apricot Twist, Spellbox, the former of which also doesn't exist, but the latter is still out there and playable. Heron would also post another Christmas-themed mod at the end of the year that would become one of his final realms, titled Arctica, which he'd add to World of Fate, but throughout the year his modding efforts were relegated to mostly fan patches and mod conversions for the new sequel, Trader Soul. There were a decent number of users who'd post single-item mods or reskin monsters, and there were 2 new users in particular who'd give the forum somewhat of a consistent activity. There was Samqua, who'd post a UI mod titled Overkill Grunge Reloaded and Fallout 3 inspired realm The Wasteland. And there was Derek Forst, who made dungeon mods, monster reskins, cheese-based club reskins, and high-quality UI replacements like the Gold Trim mod and the PR Nautica mod. Come 2010, most of the old members were no longer active. Then came March 30th, and a user by the name of Arachne's son joined the forums. He'd start off posting UI mods, spell boxes, original weapons, races, and then a Grove reskin called Necropsia. His arrival was followed with user Hexametanomical, who'd create the custom dungeon and town reskins Sialacane and Gates of Magis, right before the release of the 3rd sequel, Cursed King. On top of new mechanics that favored progressive storylines, the new game also featured new optimization that allowed for a larger data cap compared to the first 3 games, and that would result in Cursed King becoming the game to mod. And the result began, and the floodgates opened, as Arachne's son would shock the community 4 months later with the release of the Domains of Ra, an Egyptian-styled realm whose scale could compete against World of Fate. Then, about 5 months later, Heron would release potentially his biggest mod yet, Hyperion Legacy Survivor, a tailor-made total conversion mod that replaces Ecbaton and its dungeons with Hyperia, a seaside village on an island populated by penguins, and the story of a desolate ship captain rescuing a princess from a zombie-infested dungeon. Now, remember Z-Man from the introduction to this video? Well, 2 days after the public release of Hyperion, Z-Man emerged from his crypt and released Camelot, a medieval town on top of Grove that featured 2 dungeons, the castle and the dark forest. As a collaboration with Arachne's son, it had a load of brand new items, spells, and monsters with additions taken from Apricot Twist, Hexametanomical, and El Jefe's catalog. This burst of activity would pretty much become the last bit of content pushed out in mass, because between 2012 and 2014 we get more modders with smaller scale mods, with Blue Wolf Knight acting as the final member to the modding scene. Arachne's son would post his monster pack, his Tron items, Diablo weapons, and Yu-Gi-Oh artifacts, and Heron would post his fencing weapons, auras, and his Cursed King fan patch. Then, on January 15th, 2014, WildTangent shut its servers down, resulting in Heron and Z-Man never fully completing their new realms, countless mods and posts being lost to time, and the waning community ultimately vanishing. As the forums were closing down, lead admin Spock ported as much as he could to his personal PCTalk forum, and although he's been paying to keep it working for the last 10 years, the ancient format and the lack of desire to work for a dead community has somewhat degraded it over time. But despite that, he is one of the mythic names that deserve to be remembered for his contributions to preserving this history for longer than anybody expected. But as of the making of this video, the finished mod list is riddled with empty posts brought on by script errors, and you need an account to view anything, and registration doesn't look like it works anymore. But if there was any modding activity between 2014 and 2021, this was the place it was posted. Spock also hosts the Fate mod site, which is currently the main archive with a sorted appendix for mods of all 4 games, and the answer to the PC Talks registration security question that I swear to God stumped literally everybody, not just me. Although the number of working downloads is shaky and old Johnny Rotten might have better luck with the older stuff, you can find most of the major mods post 2007 sorted here by author. There is also the Shivtr site for Fate mods established by Heron in 2013 before he fell off the face of the earth, and you can still access it by making an account. This forum wasn't very active, being used more as an archive than a place for ongoing activity. It's got a small selection of mods that can be found on previously mentioned sites, but it's also the best place to find any of Heron's existing work. I will try to leave links to all these sites in the video description for you to check out if any of this stuff interests you. But to this day, this is all we have left of the modding community from its heyday. Other than that, you got the Orb Forum Snapshots from 2008 to 2014. And this one I just found from 2006, where you can read the available community posts and download any scattered mods you find. Just be sure if you find anything interesting to delete Wayback Machine from the browser's URL, or it won't direct you to the file host site. I had to rewrite the script and re-record the audio and re-edit footage. By this point in time, the community was either gone or on life support. However, Arachne's son kept with the hobby and was damn near the sole life of Fate mods between 2014 and 2019, working under the name Mikhail. He would post what I'd consider to be the game's highest quality towns, items, and pet transformation mods during this time to a mostly empty forum comprised of Spock, Pumpkinator, and a handful of old forum users like Fate Modder 121, Sullivan, Ninja Kill Zoo, and oh shit, it's Redwood Tree Sprite, look at that. Although Mikhail was mostly alone in his creative ventures, there would be 2 new faces emerging from this era in particular. Gam 2000 joined when the PCTalk forums reopened his registration in 2018, and they'd post a massive collection of old mods bundled and ported into Cursed King, which they'd called the Ultimate Mod Pack. Before the forums closed in the first place in 2015, a user by the name of Mr. Kalu, who I believe was a quiet member of the old forums, posted this. My God, do I want to talk more about this, but I'm holding off for now. Then the community Discord opened in 2021 and brought us to where we are today, created by the Smoke CS, who had begun a speedrunning scene and initially developed a server for it. Once word spread to the PC Talk and the subreddit, the hub gave the community a bit of a revival. Though not as prominent as it once was, the combination of Mikhail and Gam 2000 joining the server as Onibushi and Brovivian Returnal respectively, and the source code for the first 2 games leaking in 2014, brought a new generation of Fate modders that have been very slowly growing ever since. The Discord server now has its own mods section where you can get downloads to Onibushi's catalog, as well as new tools such as Luxon's mod patcher for original Fate, and the separate add-on that makes it compatible with Mod Nexus's Vortex. There's a new save file editor by Chinaman for the first 3 games, both of the Blender plugins, a Google Drive link to a massive 3GB archive of very old mods collected by very salty Oreos that... Another reason why I'm re-recording this script, I did not expect history to happen as I was making this video. I begun making this video in December. I began recording it in April, and I almost fully edited up to this section in July. It is now August, and I am re-recording this fucking video. Sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, and a performance patch by user Wendy's for the Steam version of Original Fate, which fixes the new memory leaks that tank the FPS and make load times way longer than they need to be. There's also new mods by new users, like Baked Toast, Dude Versa, Hey I'm Lily, Very Salty Oreos, Valachan, Jenny Cow, and Kalia that you can find either hosted on this Discord or on Mod Nexus. And that, my friends, is all the history of Fate modding I could find. I'd say goodbye to the people who don't care beyond that, but let's be real, ain't nobody watching this shit. But if you are, then pause. If you're interested in the specific mods that you can download and play right now, please be aware of this fact beforehand, because this series is designed around building characters over an extended period of time and clocking in a lot of hours. I've clocked in a lot of hours into this game. Now, here's the thing with modding the first 3 games. If you use a character to interact with any new additions, say for instance killing new monsters, wielding a new weapon, or traveling to a new realm, then remove that mod from the realms list for any reason, the game will crash before it finishes the first loading screen, and you will not be able to access your characters until you either reload the mod or manually delete the save file from the persistent folder. Oh, you mean the one located next to the cache that I have to delete anyways? Do you own the Steam version or the WildTangent version? Well, obviously I mean the Steam version. Nope! You need to go into your Steam user data to get these numbered folders, which represent the app ID on your games. You can find which number corresponds to which game by going to your Steam library, right-clicking the game, selecting properties, and clicking the Updates tab.
Hello, Gamer Corey here. I've come to clarify. Items and monsters are actually totally fine to add and remove, but if you step 1 foot into a realm, then you're going to need it from here on out. Also, I don't know why Steam is so picky with the integrity of the save files, but don't actually delete them. WildTangent saves and Steam saves work differently. That method only works with the WildTangent version. In Steam, you can delete a fresh character with 1 second of playtime and it makes the same crash anyway, so maybe keep a fresh 0.ffd file from each of the Steam games as a backup instead. Also, don't bother with the Updates tab. These are the numbers that correlate to each game. Thought they would be unique to each person's system. Turns out they are not.
Oh, that's a lot of work.
Hell yeah it is, brother. And I'm still telling you what the solution is.
This is my Fate mod folder. I have it located in my external SSD that I use for data hoarding. This folder is full of tools, uninstalled mods, save backups, all organized by game, and most importantly, shortcuts. Dude, half of what you need to keep track of needs to be located in polar opposite sectors of your hard drive. So to keep a hub of all you need, find your important folders, right-click on them, and create a shortcut. Then cut it with Ctrl-X and paste it in the modding folder. That way you can easily find all the source files for the 4 games, their individual save locations, and their caches from all the same spots. If you're interested at all in modding these games, I highly recommend taking this route. Also, the issue of the games crashing before the title screen doesn't exist in Cursed King, so you don't have to keep track of your saves as thoroughly as the first 3 games, but definitely keep backups if you're getting into a mod with a pre-built character. And when it comes to the first game, in my own experience, I'd personally only add dungeon templates and UI mods. Hopefully this wasn't too disruptive or confusing. Please refer to this part of the video if you ever need to in the future, even though it's right at the end. And catch me next time for part 2. I originally intended for this to be an hour-long video, but I've been working on this thing for months now. And while I do like the practice of long-term projects, with all the new information that has come out since the initial writing of the script, I think I'd rather split this up into parts and consider it finished. Apologies if it takes me another year to create the second part. I really do believe I won't give up on it since I've already fully edited the first section, and I really want to talk more about these mods, but the history and the practice of this game's modding scene was the most important section to me anyways, and I feel like putting it out will help fuel a natural motivation help me finish the rest of it. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're interested. Apologies for the channel's format, it's mostly a modge podge of high school projects, and it might continue to be a modge podge of adult projects, but if you enjoyed this video, nice.